Some people wake up in the morning, stretch, yawn, and then think, who can I disrespect today? You know the type. They test your patience, push your buttons, and sit there grinning, just waiting for you to lose it. That's their game. But here's the thing, they don't expect you to stay calm. When you deliver a comeback so sharp, so quietly devastating, it makes them rethink every life choice that brought them to that moment. No yelling, no drama, just a simple, calculated line that leaves them speechless as you walk away with your dignity fully intact. In this video, I'll show you exactly what to say when a rude person disrespects you, so they regret ever trying. These are Stoic comebacks, elegant, effortless, ruthlessly effective. If you're tired of people mistaking your kindness for weakness, stick around. And hey, if you love thought-provoking lessons on Stoicism, self-mastery, and navigating life with wisdom and a little swagger, hit subscribe. Every week, we dive deep into powerful insights to help you level up. And if you're a brand looking to partner up, check the description. Let's create something impactful together. Ready? Let's go. 1. You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to ignore it. One of the most underrated power moves you can use when dealing with rude, arrogant, or judgmental people is simple. Do nothing. Not out of weakness, but out of complete control. It's not about fighting back, raising your voice, or wasting your energy. It's about sending a quiet, unshakable message. Their words mean absolutely nothing to you. You see, rude people don't act the way they do because they have something useful to say or because they're genuinely concerned about you. They act that way because they crave control. They need to feel superior. They want to position themselves as the authority, as if their opinion is law and your job is to submit. But here's the truth. They're not looking for a conversation. They're looking for a reaction. And when you refuse to give them one, when you don't argue, when you don't explain yourself, when you just nod and move on, you leave them powerless. That's the moment they realize they don't have influence over you. And trust me, that realization stings. I remember a time early in my career when I was determined to switch industries, leaving a stable, well-paying job to pursue something I was passionate about. It wasn't a reckless decision. I had spent months preparing, learning, saving. But when I shared my decision with a former mentor, someone I once looked up to, he leaned back in his chair and said, "That's a mistake. You're throwing away a sure thing for a fantasy." And for a split second, I felt that urge to defend myself, to lay out every reason why I knew this was the right move. But then I stopped. Why was I explaining myself to someone who had played it safe his entire life? Someone who had settled for comfort over fulfillment. Instead, I said nothing. I smiled politely, finished my coffee, and left. And in that silence, I realized something important. His criticism wasn't about me. It was about his own fear, his own limitations. People who criticize you most harshly are often speaking from their insecurities. The louder they are, the more they need to prove something not to you, but to themselves. Stoic philosophy teaches that you cannot control what others say or do, but you can control how you respond, or, more importantly, if you respond at all. By choosing to remain calm and unshaken, you protect your peace, and you deny them the power they so desperately want. This isn't passive. It's power at its purest. The next time someone questions your path, judges your choices, or tries to tear you down, remember, their opinion is just noise, and you are under no obligation to listen. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need their approval. Your life is your own, and that's the only truth that matters. 2. If I had $1 for every smart thing you said, I'd be broke. There's a certain type of person who believes that if they talk the loudest, they must be the smartest in the room. You've met them. They interrupt. They make snide remarks. They disguise insults as jokes, and they do it with a smug certainty that no one will challenge them. But what's really going on beneath the surface is insecurity. People who feel the need to belittle others in public are often masking their own lack of substance. They rely on sarcasm, not intelligence. And the louder they are, the more they hope you won't notice how little they actually have to say. That's what makes it so satisfying and effective when you expose them for exactly what they are. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I worked on a small team with a guy named Chris. Chris was the kind of coworker who always had something to say, but never anything valuable. He was the self-proclaimed expert on every topic, whether or not he had any real experience. He thrived on interrupting meetings, throwing out sarcastic comments, dismissing ideas before they were even finished. And people laughed, maybe not because he was funny, but because they didn't want to be his next target. For a while, I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't worth the energy. But then, one afternoon during a strategy meeting, I was presenting a concept I'd spent weeks developing. As soon as I started laying it out, Chris cut me off with one of his classic lines, questioning my intelligence in front of everyone, his voice thick with mockery. It wasn't new, but something in me snapped into focus. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get defensive. I simply turned to him, calm, collected, and said, "If I had $1 for every smart thing you said, I'd be broke." And it stopped him cold. The room went quiet, but I wasn't interested in the reaction. What mattered was that he knew. He realized in that moment that his behavior no longer worked on me. He looked away, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and had nothing left to say for the rest of the meeting. And from that point forward, he kept his sarcasm to himself. This is the essence of Stoic philosophy in action. Control yourself, not the other person. You don't have to engage in their game. In fact, you shouldn't. People like Chris feed off reactions. They want the argument because it makes them feel powerful. But if you refuse to give them what they want, if you maintain your composure and deliver one calm, precise response, you rob them of their weapon. The truth is, most people who are quick to tear others down have built nothing of their own. They speak to be heard, not to add value. And once you recognize that, their words lose all meaning. Stoicism teaches us that it's not the insult that harms us, but our reaction to it. The person who stays silent, who holds their ground, who speaks with purpose rather than impulse, holds the real power. And when you understand this, you'll see clearly, you're not in a battle of wits with them. You're in control of yourself, and that's more than enough. 3. I don't argue with people who thrive on disrespect. There comes a moment when you realize arguing with certain people is pointless, not because you can't win the argument, but because there's nothing to win. Some people don't engage in conversations to exchange ideas or to understand. They engage to dominate, to belittle, to assert a twisted sense of superiority over others. They aren't interested in truth or resolution. They thrive on stirring up conflict, watching you squirm, pushing you into a reaction they can control. And once you see it for what it is, the game changes. The only way to win is not to play. I learned this in a hard but valuable lesson years ago. I was working on a team project, the kind that required collaboration, ideas, and respect. There was a man on the team, let's call him David. David wasn't just difficult. He was disrespectful by nature. It wasn't enough for him to disagree with an idea. He needed to make whoever spoke feel small for even having it. In every meeting, he would cut people off mid-sentence, roll his eyes, and deliver passive-aggressive comments dressed up as constructive criticism. He had a way of turning every discussion into a battleground where he was always the self-declared victor. And the worst part, he did it with a smile, like it was just honesty, and everyone else needed to toughen up. But it wasn't honesty. It was cruelty masked as candor. One afternoon, I was presenting a strategy I had spent weeks preparing. Before I had even finished laying out the framework, David interrupted with that smug tone, dismissing it as naive and simplistic. Years earlier, I would have taken the bait. I would have explained myself, defended every point, and exhausted myself trying to prove my intelligence to someone who was never interested in hearing it. But that day was different. I saw him clearly. He wasn't debating. He wasn't offering feedback. He was provoking. And I wasn't going to feed it. Instead of engaging, I paused. I met his gaze, calm and steady, and said, "I don't argue with people who thrive on disrespect." And then I said nothing more. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable for me. It was for him. Because in that moment, he realized I wasn't playing his game. There was no defense, no reaction, no argument to manipulate. He sat back, fidgeting in his chair, searching for something else to say, but the power had already shifted. From that day forward, David no longer targeted me. He couldn't, because I had made it clear, I don't argue with people who thrive on disrespect. This is the core of Stoic philosophy in practice. The Stoics teach us to master ourselves, not others. You can't control whether someone is disrespectful, but you can control whether or not you let it touch you. These people thrive on reaction. Your anger, your defensiveness, even your explanations, those are the rewards they seek. Refusing to engage isn't weakness. It's power, a power they fear, because it forces them to confront the emptiness of their own behavior. When they can't provoke you, they lose control. And when they lose control, they lose the only power they thought they had. The truth is, some people argue not to solve anything but to win, to feed their ego, to feel dominant. They are not looking for clarity or understanding. They are looking for the upper hand. They are fighting battles that have nothing to do with you, and everything to do with their own insecurity. And when you see this clearly, you realize they aren't worth your energy. You learn to protect your peace by refusing to enter their arena. You walk away, not because you are defeated, but because you are above the fight. You maintain your dignity, your clarity, and your self-respect. And in that silence, in that refusal to engage, lies the most devastating truth: they've already lost. If you found these insights valuable, let me know by commenting yes below. Your thoughts matter, and I'd love to hear from you. 4. Your attitude isn't going to get you very far in life. This isn't just a clever comeback. It's a wake-up call, a line that forces someone to take a hard look at themselves and where their behavior is taking them. People who walk around being rude, dismissive, and condescending often believe they're winning in life. They mistake arrogance for confidence, disrespect for strength, and belittling others for influence. But the truth is, that kind of attitude is a one-way ticket to nowhere. They may get attention in the short term. They may even intimidate a few people into silence. But life has a way of humbling those who treat others like they're disposable. I once worked with a man named Alan, a senior manager who built his entire reputation on intimidation. He was sharp, yes, but he confused cutting people down with being effective. Every meeting was a performance. If someone made an honest mistake, he'd make a public spectacle out of it. If someone shared an idea he didn't like, he wouldn't just reject it, he'd crush it, making sure they felt foolish for even speaking up. Alan believed this made him a leader. What it really did was make people afraid to work with him. Conversations behind closed doors were always the same: how to avoid dealing with him, how to keep him out of important discussions, because his negativity drained everyone. And it wasn't long before leadership took notice. One afternoon, during a project review, Alan openly mocked a junior team member who had spent months preparing a report. He didn't just question the work, he questioned the person's competence in front of the entire team, and you could feel the air get thick with discomfort. People laughed nervously, hoping to move on. But I had seen enough. As calmly as I could, I said, "Your attitude isn't going to get you very far in life." And I meant it. The words weren't thrown in anger. They were a fact. Because the reality is, no one respects the person who tears others down to build themselves up. No one promotes the person who can't work with a team. No one trusts the person who sees every interaction as an opportunity to dominate. And that's what makes this line so powerful. It's not an insult. It's a truth they've been trying to avoid. In that moment, Alan didn't have a snarky comeback. He leaned back, silent, but I could see it on his face. He knew I was right. People like him often do. They just don't hear it often enough. And in the months that followed, it was clear his influence was fading. His name was no longer mentioned for big projects. He was passed over for opportunities because, no matter how skilled he was, no one wanted to work with him. Stoic philosophy teaches us to focus on what's in our control: our actions, our character, our responses. It also teaches us to recognize that the behavior of others is often driven by insecurity and fear, masked as arrogance. When we call it out with clarity and composure, we don't just protect ourselves, we hold up a mirror. Sometimes people need to see the truth about where their attitude is leading them. And when you calmly, firmly point it out, it has the potential to stop them in their tracks, because, deep down, they know it too. That's why it stings. That's why it works. The world doesn't reward cruelty. It rewards integrity, cooperation, respect. People may not say it out loud, but they always remember how you made them feel. The next time someone acts like their rudeness makes them untouchable, remind them of the truth. That kind of attitude isn't getting them very far. And then watch in silence as they wrestle with the reality they've worked so hard to ignore. 5. This conversation was over before it even started. This isn't just a clever response. It's a complete shutdown, a verbal checkmate. It's the kind of line that doesn't just end an argument, it erases the possibility of one ever happening. You see, disrespectful people don't thrive on truth or reason. They thrive on chaos. They want to pull you into conflict because that's where they feel strongest. They want you emotional, defensive, scrambling to protect your pride. That's their playground. But when you refuse to step onto that battlefield, when you calmly let them know that the conversation was over before it even started, you strip them of all power. You make it painfully clear that they have no influence over your state of mind. And that realization hits them harder than any insult ever could. I'll never forget a situation that taught me this lesson firsthand. Years ago, a close friend of mine, Maria, was leading a community volunteer project. It was something deeply personal to her, an initiative she'd spent months planning, pouring her time and heart into. But there was one person on the team, Daniel, who seemed determined to undermine her. He wasn't openly aggressive. He was worse. He made passive-aggressive remarks in meetings, undercut her ideas with backhanded compliments, and always seemed to find a way to question her competence without ever saying it outright. Maria tried to stay professional, focusing on the work, but you could see the toll it was taking. Daniel wanted her to crack, to get upset, to argue with him in front of the team so he could play the victim. Then, one day during a planning session, he made another of his trademark digs, suggesting that if Maria had thought things through better, they wouldn't be behind schedule. There was a pause in the room. You could feel everyone brace for a reaction. But instead of defending herself, Maria took a breath, calmly closed her notebook, and said, "This conversation was over before it even started." And then she turned her attention to the next person in the room, as if Daniel didn't exist. It was quiet for a long moment. He sat there, visibly thrown off, completely unsure of how to proceed. There was no fight, no defensive scrambling, just an undeniable shift in control. And from that day forward, he stopped targeting her. Not because he suddenly respected her, but because he realized he no longer had the power to provoke her. This is Stoic philosophy in its purest form. Marcus Aurelius taught that the opinions of others only have as much power as we choose to give them. The moment you understand that, you stop giving your energy to people who haven't earned it. People like Daniel aren't interested in understanding or resolution. They want to control the emotional tone of the room. And when you deny them that, they are left with nothing. Refusing to engage is not weakness. It is discipline. It is strength. It is the recognition that not every fight is worth your time, and that some people are best dealt with by offering them indifference. Because nothing wounds a person who thrives on conflict more than realizing they're irrelevant to your peace of mind. And that's the power of saying, without anger or arrogance, "This conversation was over before it even started." It is a line that ends the game before it can begin, leaving them to sit in the silence they created while you move on, unbothered and in control. In that moment, they lose because you've already won. 6. Thanks for your input. I'll be sure to forget it immediately. Rude people thrive on control. That's the uncomfortable truth. Their goal isn't to offer insight or feedback. It's to rattle your confidence, to shrink your sense of self, and drag you down to their level. They speak not because they have anything meaningful to say, but because they enjoy hearing themselves talk. It's about power specifically, taking it from you. And most people unknowingly hand it over by reacting. They argue, defend, explain, or worse, internalize the insult. That's exactly what the rude person wants. They want you to carry their words like a weight, to replay them later in the quiet moments when you're alone. They want to live rent-free in your mind. But here's where Stoic philosophy offers a different way. You can strip them of that power in an instant. You can acknowledge their effort just enough to dismiss it completely by calmly responding with something like, "Thanks for your input. I'll be sure to forget it immediately." You send a message they aren't prepared for. You make it clear that their words are so insignificant, so devoid of value, they won't even be remembered. And that, for them, is devastating. They expected you to react. They expected to see anger or, at the very least, discomfort. Instead, they are met with complete indifference. That's where the power lies. Indifference, not anger, unravels them. You make them realize in that moment that they don't matter enough to disrupt your peace. You are not validating them by fighting back. You are not offering them the attention they crave. And as a result, they lose. Stoic wisdom reminds us that the only true control we have is over our own mind and reactions. When you refuse to be dragged into someone else's chaos, you reclaim that control. You protect your energy. You walk away with your dignity intact while they are left holding their own bitterness and noise. This isn't about being clever for the sake of it. It's about practicing self-mastery. It's about understanding that not every comment deserves your attention, and not every battle is worth your time. Some people are better left unheard and forgotten. If you found these insights valuable, let me know by commenting yes below. Your thoughts matter, and I'd love to hear from you. 7. You seem really dedicated to making a fool of yourself. Some people seem to wake up every morning with one goal in mind: to stir up conflict and drag others into it. They thrive on drama, pointless arguments, and making others feel small. It's almost as if they measure their worth by how much chaos they can create in a day. They think they're clever, quick-witted, maybe even powerful. But what they don't realize is that their behavior is slowly exposing them for what they really are: foolish. And when you handle them the right way, you hold up a mirror that forces them to see it, whether they're ready to admit it or not. One of the most effective ways to deal with people like this isn't through anger or defense. It's through composure and precision. You don't react emotionally. You stay calm and deliver a simple, devastating truth. When they try to provoke you, you let them know that they're only making a fool of themselves. And you do it in such a controlled and detached way that it catches them completely off guard. You flip the script. They thought they were embarrassing you, but suddenly the spotlight is on them, and not in the way they wanted. History gives us a perfect example of this kind of response. During the height of the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. faced constant ridicule and attempts to provoke him into anger or retaliation. There was a particularly infamous incident when he was addressing a hostile crowd. A man shouted out from the audience, belittling him in front of thousands. Dr. King didn't respond with rage or insult. He simply looked at the man, paused, and continued his speech with grace, as if the outburst didn't even register. That moment wasn't just about keeping his cool. It was about demonstrating power through restraint. He made it clear that the man's words had no weight. The heckler ended up embarrassing himself, looking small and foolish, while Dr. King's dignity remained untouchable. It wasn't just nonviolence. It was mastery over his own emotions and a refusal to be dragged down to the level of disrespect. This is the essence of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics understood that our energy is sacred and should not be wasted on those trying to provoke us. People who behave rudely or cruelly are often driven by insecurity, though they mask it as confidence or superiority. They want to throw you off balance, to pull you into a fight where they feel strong. But when you remain unmoved, when you calmly acknowledge their behavior without letting it touch you, you disarm them completely. Telling someone, in essence, that they're making a fool of themselves isn't about mockery. It's about clarity. It's holding a mirror to their actions and letting them see what they're really doing. Whether they accept it or not is irrelevant. The power lies in your ability to remain above their games. And that's what Stoicism offers: control over yourself, not the world around you. When you protect your peace and refuse to engage in petty conflict, you not only maintain your dignity, you expose their foolishness without ever having to raise your voice. The next time someone tries to bait you into an argument, remember this: the goal is not to win the fight, but to show them it was never worth having. Stay calm, stay clear, and walk away knowing they just spent their energy trying to bring you down, only to end up embarrassing themselves. That is real power. That is self-mastery. Conclusion. At the end of the day, rude people only win if you let them rent space in your mind for free. And you, my friend, are under no obligation to be anyone's emotional punching bag. When you stay calm, drop a sharp line, and move on like their nonsense was barely a blip on your radar, you take back control. That's the heart of Stoic philosophy. You don't control them, but you absolutely control you. And nothing is more powerful or satisfying than watching someone realize they can't shake you. So, the next time someone disrespects you, don't get mad, don't get loud, just get smart. Give them a line they'll be replaying in their head while you're already 3 steps ahead, living your best life. If you found this helpful and you're ready to master not just comebacks, but your entire mindset. Hit subscribe now. Every week, we dive deep into Stoic wisdom, life strategies, and a little tough love to help you stay unshakable in a chaotic world. And hey, drop a comment and tell me which line you're using first. I read them all. See you in the next video.